Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Pete here for a live episode of All Things Gout in lieu of a pre-prepared video for the week. So we are live today, and the topic of discussion will be protein. Now, in the past, I've done a lot of videos on our gout hypothesis, and of the main concern to avoid gout flares, we want to eliminate what I call the deadly triad, and that's the combination of alcohol, fructose, and hyperglycemia, all happening within a short time frame. And specifically, we're talking about these effects on the chondrocyte that is within the joint where a gout flare can happen. Now, if you've gone on the ketogenic diet to put gout in remission, I've talked about this also quite a bit. The goal is to get keto adapted and get the gout into remission. And then after that happens, the concern is whether or not you're still hyperuricemic. And if you are still hyperuricemic, then there are things that we've talked about before that you might need to consider in order to bring the uric acid down. However, that is not the topic of today's discussion. The other issue post-keto adaption, after gout is in remission, is the issue of protein, because I believe that the issue of protein is secondary to the deadly triad, that of the alcohol, the fructose, and the hyperglycemia. But after we have brought the deadly triad into control, right, and we're in keto adaption, now the consumption of protein has to be taken more seriously. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I want to focus, we're going to focus on the protein, but what I want you to get from this is I'm going to come at this from a global perspective to put this in context of the whole diet as it occurs together with the other macronutrients. First, we're going to focus on primarily, if you want gout remission, the things that are important. So give me a second here. I'm going to get my slides up. Oh, and by the way, I will answer questions. I have a slide deck here. I'd like to run through this short presentation on the protein, and then feel free to put your questions in the chat. And then after I'm done with the presentation, if you guys are here and you're asking questions, then I'll remain and we can keep a dialogue going. Oh, and before I take this down, UASure has offered my followers a discount for the uric acid meter. So I have the code there. It's also in the chat. And if you go to their website and you want to purchase a meter, use this coupon and they'll give you 10% off. All right. And I'm going to leave that in the chat. But for my slides, I need to remove it for now. It'll be in the chat. Okay. So what do I use? What is my system for the ketogenic diet? And why do I want to be on the ketogenic diet? Well, I have two reasons. One, I needed to reverse prediabetes, which I was diagnosed with in 2019. And in 2016, I was diagnosed with gout. And I have been on the ketogenic diet now for 3 years. And in my interest to be able to reach out and help people that are suffering from similar chronic ailments as I do, I came up with a system, and I call it the Makes Me Healthy system. M stands for a metabolic recovery plan. How do we reverse these conditions? In the case of gout, I call it remission. In the case of diabetes, you can be reversed. There's enough scientific data out there that we can use language like that. You can reverse type 2 diabetes using this type of eating program. And you can put gout in remission, where if you do have a flare, it's comparatively very mild compared to how it is prior to being on the ketogenic diet. As part of this process of metabolic recovery, I use and recommend assessment. And there's two kinds of assessments that I briefly want to remind you of that's important here. If this is your first time with me and you're wondering, well, how do I get gout remission? Before you even start with a different kind of eating plan or doing anything, You should have your metabolic profile looked at. You need to get some blood work, and you need to sit down with your doctor and go through the parameters to determine if gout is your only problem. Because when we look at this slide, we see that most gout sufferers overlap into other chronic disease areas. Significantly, over 3/4 are also hypertensive, meaning that they have high blood pressure. That includes me when I was first diagnosed with gout. Chronic kidney disease is an issue. Obesity is true for over half of us. And a full quarter of us are type 2 diabetic in addition to the gout. And then there are issues of kidney stones, cardiovascular disease, and stroke. And I would suggest that if you're a gout sufferer, that you should have some blood work done and take a look at the other biomarkers to determine whether or not you also could possibly be in one of these other categories. Because if you are, then it's going to be paramount that, and there's even more reason then to consider a low carb lifestyle. And for your use in the show notes, I will make sure to add a link to the list of biomarkers that I think, at least in my own experience coaching and also in myself, that I have done regularly in order to be able to say something intelligent about what my health status is in regard to having reverse prediabetes and being able to monitor how I'm going forward in the ketogenic lifestyle, including the remission of gout. Now, there are biomarkers that you can measure completely on your own. You don't have to go and have blood work done for them. And the 4 that I recommend, not only to my clients, but also I do on myself every single day, are my weight, my blood pressure, my blood glucose, and also ketones. Weight of the 4 things, I actually think they're all important. And the reason why weight is important is because when you start the ketogenic diet, it's likely, if you're compliant and you've kept the carbs low enough, you've eliminated the sugar and the aspects of the deadly triad, right? You should see your weight starting to come down. And the only way to know that is if you're actually tracking it. So I write it down every single day in a non-emotional way. I am not stressing. I'm not thinking about what the scale says. I'm just getting on it and I'm writing a number down. And every few weeks, I'm going to look at that number, because as you start into the ketogenic lifestyle and then you get keto adapted, eventually your weight is going to stabilize. It's going to come down and then it will stabilize. And this is something that I've seen as a trend for over 3 years now. I'm in my 4th year right now, living the 4th year of a ketogenic lifestyle. Blood pressure is also something that you should track, because most of us that have gout are also hyperintensive. And when we go on the ketogenic diet, over time, over a few years, you're going to see blood pressure come down, again, if you're compliant with the lifestyle. And then the glucose and the ketones are important, especially if you're diabetic on top of being a gout sufferer, because within days, literally, of going on the ketogenic diet, you're going to see your fasting glucose start to normalize. And then over time, over months, you're going to see it normalize. And then the ketones are important, because this is how we know whether we're in ketosis or not, and we can evaluate that situation. And remember, all the while that you're writing these biomarkers down, you have a logbook or you have an electronic app. I use Heads Up Health, that you can take with you to the doctor when you're discussing your gout and when you're discussing potentially one of these other ailments, and you have the biomarkers to show them. You can, for most of us, blood pressure comes down, and if you're recording that value, you can slide the book across the table and say, look, this is what my blood pressure has been doing over the last 6 months. It's coming down, or perhaps it's going up. Hopefully not. But I think you guys see what I'm getting at. This is the only way to really understand, and it puts the power in what I want you guys to understand about measuring biomarkers, because a lot of people argue, this is just too much. I don't want to have to stick my finger. I don't want to have to do this every day. But it puts the power in your hands, right? It puts your gout remission in your hands and not in someone else's, right? And what I'm not showing here, well, the meter is there. I also measure my uric acid every single day. And usually I measure uric acid before and after meals these days when I'm eating a new food that I haven't tried before. Why? To see what the effect is on my uric acid. That's the reason. We're going to come back to this concept as we get into this. So what is my gout protocol? Well, number one, you know what I'm going to say if you listen to my channel. We have to eliminate the deadly triad if we want gout remission. So that means we have to eliminate the alcohol. We have to eliminate table sugar because 50% by mass is fructose. Plus the glucose cannot be overlooked because we want to avoid a hyperglycemic event, right? The triad is the alcohol, the fructose, and hyperglycemia. We want all three of those gone. Coming back to the sugar issue, we want to eliminate high fructose corn syrups because the fructose is present in concentrations 55% or greater. We want to eliminate agave syrups because the concentration of fructose can be even greater than 90%. We want to eliminate even honey to a large extent because the concentration of fructose, again, minimum is 55%. And then lastly, processed food is a really big issue because processed food contains added sugar, added high fructose corn syrup, agave syrups, you name it, they use it in order to sweeten those foods. The next thing is we're going to cut into the carbs. And the reason that we want to do that is because we want to, and again, remember in the background of this, you may have other comorbidities. If you're also diabetic, for sure you want to cut into the carbs. But what is the benefit in isolation to a gout sufferer? By cutting into the carbs, we cut into the insulin expression, right? We're going to lower insulin expression. And by doing that, we're operating in a world of ketosis where we become fat-burning animals. And as a side product of the fat burning is the formation of the ketones. And the one that we're most interested in is beta-hydroxybutyrate, because the literature has shown that beta-hydroxybutyrate actually inhibits the inflammasome that's required for the gout flare. So the ketogenic diet decreases the probability of a gout flare for two main reasons. One, it decreases the inflammatory cascade and lowers the activation of JNK1 and also lowers the inflammatory cytokines, the one at the top of the cascade being IL-1 beta. So we lower the chronic low-grade inflammation of the chondrocyte in the joint. Secondly, by producing beta-hydroxybutyrate, we establish a double whammy because the beta-hydroxybutyrate also inhibits directly the formation of the inflammasome, preventing or at least decreasing the severity of a flare. We're going to focus on low-carb vegetables, and I'm actually going to touch on that today. We're going to prioritize protein, and that's the main subject. Don't worry, people, we're coming to it. And then we're also going to increase natural fats. We need to do that because we cut the carbs. And the ketogenic lifestyle is not calorie restriction. We are not mentally going, okay, I'm going to eat less, right? So when we pull the carbs down, we're going to elevate the fat in order to replace the calories lost by the carb restriction. And then lastly, we want to track biomarkers. I'm going to harp on that because by testing for uric acid using a handheld meter and then also the ketones and the glucose, we have at our fingertips a very powerful method to be able to see for ourselves what the effect of this lifestyle is on our biomechanics, if you will. I'm probably misusing that word. So very quickly, here's the biochemistry of the proteins. So proteins contain particles that when they're broken down produce the purines, mainly the GMP and the AMP that's going to come out of that. And those particular molecules can be broken down through a series of steps into uric acid. Not all protein is alike. Some proteins tend to have a bigger uric acid effect than others, and we're going to talk about the nuances of this as we speak about this right now. And also, you're looking at one of the main reasons why beer is so bad, because beer not only contains alcohol itself, right, which is part of the deadly triad, but beer is also brewed using yeast, and the yeast is full of purine particles that can, when they're broken down, generate uric acid. So there's a lot of effects that you get that contribute to the uric acid that are coming from beer. And this is why in the superficial internet, you see that beer is really picked on in terms of the formation of uric acid, and for good reason. It is a part of the deadly triad when it boils down to it. One of the things that you need to consider when we talk about eating protein are the sauces that we put on it. If you follow Dr. Johnson's work in this area, decades of publications, and the animal and tissue culture, human tissue culture, and then even some clinical studies that he has completed, we find that umami foods are also problematic. And these are foods that contain monosodium glutamate, inosine monophosphate, and adenosine monophosphate. The most common one that most people are familiar with are dark soy sauces. So you need to be really careful about the sauces that you pick to cook your food in, or that you put on the meat, to be certain that you're not using an umami type sauce. So if you do use soy sauces in the cooking programs that I've introduced or that we're going to talk about today, you want to be really careful about amounts. You don't want to go gangbusters on a dark soy sauce, because you could be setting yourself up for a gout flare, because the umamis are in particular very bad because of where they enter the pathway, right? They have direct access to the pathway right ahead of the formation of the uric acid. And remember what we're trying to prevent: the instantaneous sudden rise in uric acid within the chondrocyte, which is already inflamed because of consuming over the long term the standard American diet, which is hyperglycemic in nature. So what kind of proteins are we eating? And some of you that keep up with me may have seen this diagram before. I want to draw your attention to part 2 and 3. In part 2 is a typical breakfast, and you can see I have a piece of meat sitting on that plate. And then in number 3, you can see what I call the three-way plate. There's 2 low-carb vegetables on the plate, and then we have a slice of salmon. This is the way I eat. And now let's specifically get into the issue of the protein. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about the three-way plate. What you're going to want to do, okay, so you have a choice how you want to approach the amount of protein that you're going to eat. One way to do it is to make sure on the three-way plate, you're going to have one segment where the protein is, that you have the amount of protein that would correlate to a fat wallet that a man usually carries in their back pocket, or on the low end, the size of a deck of cards. This is a good intuitive way to start eating in the low carb lifestyle. Now, how do you know whether the protein is too much or not? Remember what I said about testing for uric acid, because you can always test your uric acid level before you eat, and then you test it after you eat at the 1 hour and the 2 hour mark. And then you can gauge the amount of protein that you ate in that meal based on what you're seeing for the uric acid spike. And there's really 2 pieces of information that you're going to get out of that. The first is you're going to see which proteins affect you the least. And And that's going to mean of those proteins, you can probably eat more of them, right? And then the second thing, the second piece of information, which is perhaps more crucial, is which of the proteins that you're consuming really are spiking your uric acid. And those are the ones that you're going to have to either eliminate from the diet, or you're going to tone them down, right? You're going to back down on the amount that you're eating. Another way to do this, and I know you've been staring at the slide, is that you can calculate how much protein should be adequate for you. And the way this is done is by getting on a scale and determining how many pounds you weigh. And I'm using my weight there from this morning. I made this slide earlier today. So this morning I weighed 137 pounds. This is 3.5 years into the ketogenic diet. So what we're going to do first is we need to get the poundage converted into kilograms. So we're going to take my weight at 137 pounds and we're going to divide that by 2.2 pounds, because 2.2 pounds is equal to 1 kilogram. So when we divide 137 by 2.2, we get my weight in kilograms at about 62 kilograms. Then we take the kilogram weight and we're going to multiply that times a value. Now that value needs to be between 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight up to 2 grams of protein containing food per kilogram of body weight. How do you decide where you are in there? So if you're highly athletic like I am and you're working out almost every single day, on the days when I'm not working out, I'm still going out and walking between 2 to 3 miles. All right. And the other days I'm strength training and doing hits. So the amount of protein I'm eating is on the high end of that range. My protein is up towards the 2 gram per kilogram. Now for this example, what I did was I chose a value between 1.75 grams per kilogram and 2, because that's a good range to pick from for somebody who's relatively active. If you're inactive, then pick a value that's down closer to 1.5. So what we're going to do is take the 62 kilograms and we multiply it times 1.75. And what we're going to get is the grammage of total protein that you should be eating each day. So for me, that's around 109 grams of protein. And then I'm going to divide that by 6.5, because 1 ounce of protein containing food has about 6.5 grams of protein in it. And what I'm getting, 6.5 grams of protein containing food. So what I'm going to get out of that is 17 ounces of protein containing food, which is a little over a pound. And then what I do is just split that up over the course of the day. And I eat 2 meals a day on the ketogenic diet. This is a transition that happens naturally because of the high satiety of both the fat that's in the diet and also the protein that's in the diet. So over the course of the day, I'm going to ingest about a pound of protein overall. And if you don't like the analogy of a deck of cards and or a fat wallet, and you're going, that's just too vague for me, Dr. Pete, well, then you can run this calculation on your weight. And you can pick up really cheap scales on Amazon, right? And so then you can mass out exactly based on that calculation we just did, you can mass out, for example, how much salmon that you're going to have that night at dinner, if salmon is the thing that you're going to eat. The thing to keep in mind if you are going to scale weight this stuff is either get in the habit of doing it before you cook it or after you cook it, because cooking is going to drive the water out of it. And in order to get a consistent trend here, then you need to pick one side or the other. Either mass out the meat before you cook it, or do it after you cook it, but then be consistent about it. And then remember the take-home message here. Is this absolutism? No, it is not, right? By doing the calculation and then massing the meat and then eating it and seeing how you feel, this is then how the decision that you use to decide, okay, I need to add more protein, or I'm going to take a little bit away. You combine that, and this doesn't get you out of this situation, right? You combine it with measuring uric acid so that you know what the effects of a particular protein are. So let me just summarize this again. Use some kind of system to determine how much protein you're going to eat. You can intuitively leave this to the idea that you're going to see how you feel, right? And I know that might seem vague to some of you guys, so maybe some of you would prefer to do the calculation, get the mass, eat, use uric acid metering to see, what's going on with that, and then ask questions about, like, when I go for my walks or I do my workouts, I feel like I've adequately recovered, right? And if you feel like you're not adequately recovering, you can just tweak the protein up a little bit, right? That's kind of the thing that I'm getting at here. So remember, the whole idea behind the gout remission, this is individual. The same difference with if you're a type 2 diabetic. And what do I mean by that? We all respond to metabolism differently. None of us are the same. So there's nothing black and white about this stuff. There's no right, wrong. Use one method or use the other. See how you feel. And then it takes time to tweak the system and find the sweet spots that you need for the lifestyle. Now, I want to just go through the types of meat that I eat, right? So you can see right from the horse's mouth here, and I'll give you my opinion about each one of these. And remember, I'm an individual, I'm not you. So if you're testing uric acid the way I'm training you to do that, maybe some of these meats I'm going to talk to you about, you may have to eat less of them than me, or maybe you can eat more of them. I mean, it's just going to depend on you. So I'm going to start on the left. Chicken seems to be no problem for me, and I eat it in a variety of different ways. So bake it, fry it, however I use it to make soups. I'll take whole chickens and put them into a one of those slow cookers and put a bunch of chicken broth in there and let it cook all day, and then pull the bones out, add celery, green beans, and squash to it, and you've got a killer, absolutely killer meal for a few days. Steak is the next thing to the right. Now, you're going to hear in the superficial media that you should not eat red meat. No red meat. All right, because it's going to spike your uric acid. Okay, I don't agree with that. Hamburger actually can have an effect on my blood glucose, but I see with steak and hamburger and stuff like that I can eat a reasonable amount, like I've just trained you in, and not see some like worrying spike in my uric acid. So again, using the finger sticking to ascertain, can I eat this? How much of it? So you start with a piece of steak that maybe is 6 to 8 ounces out of that 17, right? If you're me at 137 pounds. You test the uric acid before you eat it. Then you test it 1 hour and then at 2 hours and take a look at what the uric acid is. And if I'm eating steak on that level, it's not a big thing for me, right? It's not something where I go, it's not like drinking a shot of alcohol, right? If I do that, my uric acid can spike 4 units, okay? And what do I get from that? Whoa, Dr. Pete, don't do that again, right? That's in the deadly triad. So again, test it and see. More than likely, you can eat steak. The question is how much of it, right? And you can get the answer to that by doing the finger sticking. Next to the right is pork. And again, I think the take home here is going to be this, the concept of moderation, right? Pork seems to be not that big a deal for me either. I can eat ground pork. I can eat even sausage, although be careful with sausage, right? Because that's a processed food. And whoever made that sausage has added a mixer to it. And the mixer can, and usually does, have sugar in it, right? But coming back to the pork chops, let me slow down. Pork loin is one of my favorite meals that I make. And I can eat a reasonable amount of that without spiking my blood glucose and also without spiking uric acid. Salmon, again, on the fishes, you're going to hear some people telling you shouldn't have this more than once or twice a week maximum and spread it out over a number of days. Okay, that's probably true for some of you, right? But I don't think it's a good generality, because what I find with the salmon is that I can eat a reasonable amount of it. And even if I have it 2 days in a row, it's not a big deal for my uric acid. How do I know? Because I've actually tested it. So again, I want to emphasize the individual nature of this, right? The power is in your hands. Lamb. We don't eat a lot of lamb because, quite frankly, getting decent lamb where I live is not that easy to do, but it's edible here. You can cook it and eat it. And what I'm going to say is the same thing I've said about the other meats. Test it. The other take home that you should get as we go literally walk through this is the realization that this lifestyle is diverse. There's a lot of really good food in it. We're not limited to eating a single type of meal every single day, a single type of meat. That's just not true. Now, the next meal to the right is whitefish. And I have to generalize this because I eat grouper when we're in Mexico and we can actually buy it, right? Halibut, which we can't really get good halibut around here, but maybe you can where you live. Even tilapia, all right? These are all possibilities to eat. Can there be issues with this? I find more of an issue with whitefish and my uric acid spiking than I do with the salmon. Again, I check, I finger stick, and I look at what the effect is of what I'm eating on my uric acid post-meal. Does that mean I don't eat it? No, absolutely not. I just make sure to be on the low end of my proportion, the one that we've now talked about. So I would have a little bit less of that compared to a slice of salmon. Shrimp, it's known to have high uric acid in it. So does that mean I don't eat it? No, I have it. I don't eat it all the time. And when I do, I cut down on proportions. And if you're really, really concerned about it and you do like it and you want to eat it a lot, then this is an obvious thing to do your uric acid testing on. Test before the meal and then post-meal after you've eaten it. On the bottom, I have the 3 foods that we hear demonized the most in the superficial literature and on the internet. This would be the anchovies, the organ meat, which is in the middle there, that's sauteed liver, and then sardines, which is on the right. And the issue is, should you be eating less of those proteins? Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're hyperuricemic and you're eating anchovies every single day with beer, okay, you're asking for it. Quite frankly, you're asking for a gout flare. Absolutely, because you have the deadly triad, and anchovies happen to make a major contribution to the uric acid spike, which is what we're trying to avoid. Does that mean you can never have them? No, it doesn't. But when I eat an anchovy or anchovies, I deliberately scale down the proportion. I'm not going to have a lot of it because I know by my own testing that it can elevate my uric acid. Similarly with the organ meats, I eat chicken liver and also beef calf liver, but I don't have it frequently. And when I do eat it, I make sure to go easy on the quantity. And I usually eat it early in the day with eggs so that my body has the capability to get everything metabolized before the evening rolls around. And a similar argument can be made for the sardines. So on the bottom of this slide, yeah, I modulate those. Does that mean I never eat them? No, it doesn't. And remember, for you, test it with the uric acid meter, because maybe chicken liver doesn't have that effect on you that it does on me, right? This is about you taking the power to analyze this stuff yourself and see how your body reacts to it when you eat it, so you can find your pathway to the gout remission. Now, just very quickly, this entire slide is composed of low carbohydrate vegetables that you can basically eat all you want of. The broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, which can be cooked in a lot of really interesting ways. I love Brussels sprouts now. I utterly hated them before I ever knew anything about a ketogenic diet. And mainly the reason for this difference is because I actually learned how to cook them. And if you roast those things, you roast the Brussels sprouts in olive oil, and then use some butter near the end of the roasting, and salt and pepper these things, they're killer. And you can eat all you want of those. They're not going to raise your uric acid, and they also don't have any real detectable effect on your blood glucose. We have asparagus and green beans. We have eggplant, right? Eggplants can spike my blood glucose. They don't seem to bother my uric acid, but because they do tend to push my glucose up, what do? Not eat them? No, I eat less of them, right? My wife will eat significantly more of the eggplant when I cook it, which is about once a week, than I do, right? I just take a couple of slices instead of the 4 that she takes. Yellow squash and zucchini, eat all you want. Those go good in soups too, by the way. It's like a lot of this lifestyle is reteaching yourself how to cook. And zucchini and yellow squash go into a lot of stuff. On the lower left over there, we've got Japanese eggplant. It's really, really tremendous. I love roasting them. We have artichokes. Red onions seem to have some uric acid lowering effects with them, so you might consider trying them. I prefer for general cooking to use white onions because I like the more moderate flavor. I always keep the level of onions tamped down because they do contribute to elevating glucose. So I just make sure, again, common sense, eat less of them. When in doubt, test your blood, glucose, ketones, uric acid before a meal, post meal. And that will allow you to analyze what you're eating. So the next time you cook it, you can make modifications. This is such a beautiful way to do this, you guys, because you get data and you get numbers, and this directs you what to do next. And then I also put mushrooms there. I eat those in moderation. I'm careful with them because some types of mushrooms have elevated can spike your uric acid, all right? And they can also elevate glucose. So I'm just careful when I eat them in terms of total amount. And I've learned over time which ones I tend to be able to eat and which ones I should, which species, I guess, would be the word that you want to avoid. Very quickly, we eat natural fats. So ghee, butter, beef tallow, lard, avocado oil, olive oil, and coconut oil, all right? And I've done other presentations on these. When I'm going to fry something and go to high temperature, I stick to using ghee and beef tallow usually because those have high smoke points and they're really heavy in saturated fat, so they're stable in the presence of oxygen. They don't degrade on you. All right. And I use the avocado oil and the olive oil when I'm drizzling things. Like if I'm going to bake I talked about the Brussels sprouts. You can coat those with olive oil and or avocado oil. And then when you do the baking, you're not getting to temperatures that cause degradation of that particular oil. Coconut oil is something that I actually eat for dessert. All right. And that's the thing about the ketogenic diet is you're going to develop new cravings for the foods that you're eating. You should see if you're compliant with this lifestyle, your cravings for sugar and so on going down. And you should see your cravings for fats going up. This is what's happened with me. Okay. And then I just want to remind you guys, I believe in the intuitive way of eating. Just split the plate into 3 parts. 2 of the parts will have on a daily basis, this is mainly focused in the evening, are going to have keto approved vegetables in them. And then you're going to have your protein in the other segment. The size of a deck of cards or a fat wallet that a man is going to have in their back pocket, or do the calculation. And don't forget, you can test uric acid pre-meal and then post-meal in order to answer the question, could I have put more protein on the plate? And think about your hunger level and things like that. This is a system that you are supposed to tweak. You got to find the sweet spot for yourself. And here you're literally looking at my plate. This is a meal that I ate, and this is what my plate looks like essentially every night. And you can see the three-way aspect of it. So there's pork loin there. And if you were to pull that off the plate and put it on one of those scales, it's going to come in to 6 or 7 ounces. Now, remember, at the beginning of this, I said 17 ounces. I showed you how to do that calculation. Well, where's the other protein? I had it for breakfast with my eggs. That's where it is. And that's how I break things down, right? And then the other two things you see on this plate are the roasted Brussels sprouts that I talked about and steamed yellow squash in this case. You can also roast yellow squash. You can also roast zucchini in olive oil. It's fabulous. And then up and right of that is what I call my Bamo salad. So it's heavy duty in dark leafy greens with stuff in there like cucumbers. You can see olives there. I usually put a few thin slices of onion in it. I don't have tomatoes cut up in this one, and I usually go light on the tomatoes because tomatoes have fructose in them. So to give you an idea, if I put 4 slices of tomato on my wife's salad, I'm going to have 2 instead, or maybe even 1 if the tomato is large, right? That's how I roll. Okay, guys, that's what I have for you today. So hopefully this tutorial on protein, the types, the amount that you can eat. If you have questions, you can leave them, make them below this video, and everyone knows who does that I get back to you right away. Don't forget, if this is the first time you join me, click the subscription button and the bell next to it so you know the next time it is that we're going to put out a video. For my gout people, my videos are coming out regularly on Fridays, either something I've pre-prepared or a live session like this one. Don't forget it. If you're wondering, okay, this is the first I've ever heard about measuring uric acid. Where can I get a uric acid meter? You can go to www.UASure.com. And I spoke with them, it was yesterday or the day before, and they have produced a coupon for you guys that's showing there on my screen. You put that in, and that will get you a 10% discount, which is something, right? I realize, this helps. Every bit helps. So they have a brand new meter out. I'm not using it yet. I will be, but I still have strips to use up on the old meter, and I'm not going to get the new one until I've used up all my strips. So I don't see any questions coming in right now. And so I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you guys next week, and have a great goutless week. And anything that comes up, hit me in the questions below the video, and I will address them, even potentially generating the next show that I do around that subject matter. And then in the show notes today, it'll take me a bit, but I will make sure to have our website there, other ways that you can contact me. I'll put the website for the meter and so on there. Also, I'll repeat the code that was specially made for us and our channel. All right, with that, you guys have a great weekend coming up, and I will see you on the flip-flop. And remember, keep the carbs low, down the road we go.